What's up, guys? Tim Halstead here for episode 4 of yanking out the old 408 and bringing in the DragBoss 427 aluminum block. So people have talked to me before and they said, hey, can you give us a little insight on what you were running before and where you were at in regards to quarter-mile times, maybe some quick idea on the modifications. Because this way you might be able to follow along and relate to it, and you may be able to use some of the information for yourself. So here's the deal. This is a 408 Cleveland 2-bolt block. My take is there ain't no difference between a 2-bolt and a 4-bolt. Makes no difference. Any block will handle 7,500 RPM all day long, you know, unless there's some huge core shift issue. But they'll handle the RPM. I had a 385 that went 7,500 on shifts through the traps at $8,000, 5 years, not a bit of issue. That was like 13.35 or 13.5 to 1. Actually, Brian Guggenmass has the rotating assembly. He's running it now. The block failed with a crack at number 5 after that period of time, but still ran a 1016 with 7 cylinders. That was pretty impressive. So the blocks will work. They can handle it, but once you start getting the cylinder pressures up there with high compression and high RPM, it's just a matter of time before they die. And that's just how it is. It's a 49-year-old block or whatever year it is. They can't handle it. They weren't made for that power. Hence the DragBoss. And now we have a block with a foundation that we can put all the power we want to it and it won't break. We don't have to worry about any oiling issues. I gave you my take on what I feel for that. In regards to this block, it's filled up to the lower water pump holes with grout. I think that's important for stability of the cylinders. And cylinder sealing, ring seal, that kind of thing. The pistons are 1471, a little bit of a raised dome. Randy, who used to work at JD, who is now at Race Tech, it's his last set. Gas ported, scat based cranking rods, high volume oil pump, dampener. I was running a Star Machine vacuum pump. Now originally when I built this in 2013, I had a couple wheel stands that smashed, took out the oil pan a couple times. It was hard to get the thing under control. All I needed really was a set of double adjustable shocks by Mark Menser. I didn't want to put wheelie bars on the car and go through all that. I put them on, best thing I ever did. But that wheel standing issue caused a lot of damage. You know, not only in the front end and smashing stuff, and I crashed, you can see it on my other videos. But the vacuum pump, back to that story, I never really saw a big change in it. I ran my fastest times without the vacuum pump. 968 at 136 and some change with a 127 60-foot time. With taking it off, I never noticed a big change. Never got back to that fast, but the weather changed too, and you have to put that into the equation too with density air. But anyways, with this combination, 408, I used to run this intake setup. Jack Roush Ford Motorsport intake. To me, the best intake out there for Cleveland. I like it. It's always worked well for me. I ran a super sucker and a 4-hole spacer. That gave me my best times. Those two together, I think it extends the throttle bores and gives you some more low end. But I dropped probably about 800ths off the 60 foot by switching to that. When it wasn't standing up in the air, it went from a 138 to a 150, hitting the lights with the back tires. The thing was just, it was crazy. So I've always ran these two spacers, the Super Sucker and then the 4-hole 1-inch. I tried the 2-inch Super Sucker before. Probably ran about the same, maybe a little bit better with this. That's why I kept it. But the original plan was to freshen this up and then put a set of AFD heads that I got from Dave Webb back in 2005, the 4V heads, which are half ported. That's a whole nother story, won't get into that. But this TFC intake was supposed to be the combination to go with it. I've had this intake for a long time, well, probably 2006. It's ported, never ran it, not sure what to do with it. But it was going to be with those heads and run on this combo. I will tell you this, I ran this intake and this carb, which is an APD Dominator billet enforcer. Between this setup, Scott Cook Air Supremacy intake, and this old Ford Motorsport, right now, and I have to say I didn't have good testing times in regards to consistency, but really maybe picked up a mile an hour here and only a couple hundredths. So not a big change between this Dominator with spacer and intake versus this Jack Roush with the spacer setup I have. And this is a Pro Systems 1000 CFM carb. Great carb, never had no issues with it, always ran good, never really had to tune it. It was the same for this too. I ran a Barry Grant back here, the drag sleeve one, that's adjustable sleeves. You can see here, good carburetor, never had any issues, it just never could hold its own against this. And these two were pretty similar, but there again, my testing was not what it should be. It wasn't consistent enough. The setup I'm running here in regards to the cylinder heads or the A3 heads, they made a bunch of variations, and Ford has a lot of issues with their part numbers. But the first series, Phase 1 A3 heads, were what I initially ran, and that has a bolt spacing of 2.77 inches. This part here, which is raised, is flat on those heads. I had a set by Jeff Klabowski, who also did these heads in that intake. Rest in peace, Jeff. He died a few years ago. Great guy. And your stuff's still running, Jeff. Right up there. So I had sold those heads and had these heads set up, but my headers didn't match, so Jeff welded up these holes and re-drilled them so I could match my headers. These flow 375, 275. Last flowed by him. I had titanium intakes put in and some other work done by another person. Didn't see much difference in it. These latter ones here with a raised bolt face here are that prominent. So you can see it. Here's a brand new A3 head here, and you can see that bolt spacing there. There's a picture of the intakes. They're basically the same intake as a 4V, only with a filled port. So I kind of stuck with those heads. They work well, and at this point I kind of want to put the DragBoss back together with this setup right here because I know it works, it's in good shape, and it's the cheapest way I can get going on a DragBoss rather than get behind. I want to race in April and May, not August or miss this year out because I want to pick a different cylinder head. Either Scott Cook's heads, which I'm really impressed with, or the other head is the Higgins head. You know, you got your old fallbacks, which are your CHI stuff. The Kazi 400 is really up in those levels. If you're going to make big horsepower, you need a good sized head. And I think that's the problem with this intake. It's a great intake, it flows well, it's made well, but the volume, plenum volume is ridiculous. I think 408 is just the limit in size-wise. I got this intake from Todd Fuchs. He had it on like a 357. I think he was running 1070s or 80s. I don't know. Todd, you can chime in on that. But here's the deal. Here's the carburetor, APD 1050 billet enforcer. Beautiful carb, made well, all billet construction. That's where you worry about dropping it on the video. Oh yeah, back to the heads, sorry about that. So the heads were the Phase 1 were early, Phase 2 were like these, Phase 3 were Boss 351 heads. And then there was Phase, let me think about it. No, Phase 1 3/4 were the Boss 351 heads. Phase 3 were the C3 and D3 heads, if I'm not mistaken. Someone could correct me. But with this combination, I ran the Black Widow spacer from APD. It's kind of the same technology as a Super Sucker. You can kind of see that Venturi effect that would have. Increases the low end to me. Now, like I said, the Air Supremacy intake definitely rules. It's got a lot of volume. Check this out. And don't do this at home. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's 4 bottles of water, 16-ounce bottles of water. That just shows you how big that plenum is. I think what's really going to make this work is 427 cubic inches. That will work this intake. And will work these heads. What's up, guys? Tim Halstead back. So I'm going to give you a little preview of this motor, at least get some closer look at everything so you can get an idea of what's going on. First of all, here's the plenum that we had talked about on this intake. I mean, there's a straight shot right down to the valves. You can see that. Now the intake is just sitting on there. There's a little bit of gasket sealer because it's not centered perfect, but there's what you're looking at. Scott Cook Air Supremacy intake, like I said at least 3 other times, it's a great intake. It's made well, flows well. Here's what I'm running for rocker arm setup. Yellow Terra, Platinum Series. I'll tell you, I used to run the old Crane Golds and all that business with stud girdles, so much monkey business to try to adjust them. I'll tell you, once I put these on, never go back. The next thing will be a shaft system. But what's unique about these is the way they're set up with that pin down there, which is hard to see in that fulcrum, but it keeps it from rotating. You don't need guide plates. You don't need stud girdles. You take all that weight away from the valve train, and it's stable, man. Like I said, I go through now, I've gone through 8,200 things stable as hell. So that's a good thing. It's a good setup. Thanks, Australia. But here's the ports. You can see in there, pretty damn clean. There ain't no oil blowing out of there. And you can see where the bolts were welded and changed in regards to the spacing. And I think this is I don't even know what block that is. It's a DOAEL. Should know that by heart. Nothing special. Wix filter. I saw that thing that Tim Meyer put on about the filter adapter. Definitely gonna get that with the DragBoss, but probably change it on this. I think it makes a big difference. You know, I'm not sure what to do with this block. I think I may build a pro stock motor with it. I'd like to have iron heads with high ports on it, and then maybe a tunnel ram like this, old UR19, or the YN tunnel ram. But there's a good port, and look inside the ports in regards to the A3 heads, unported. I'll pop this intake off. I've always used Crane cams, Ultra Pro rocker or lifters. Had good luck with them. I think those are 3/8 push rods, trend maybe. I'll look at them when I pull it apart. You can see it there, pretty good. Let's see. I do a lot of monkey businesses with the Valley. I do make those holes bigger and chamfer them down for better drainage. And I hate that thing. It's always ugly looking, so I like to grind that thing down and make it look good. Here's a set of the exhaust ports on that A head, not ported. So we'll start taking this apart, get a better idea of what's going on inside there. Maybe you can appreciate it too. And thanks for checking it out, man. Subscribe and share, please.